everybody. My name is Regina Ippolito. Since 1947, my father-in-law, Leo Ippolito Sr., owned a sanitation company in New Jersey. My husband and I had the privilege of running it. I had the privilege of being on the A901 licensure to be able to haul sanitation in New Jersey. So, albeit this is New York, it's not a far cry from New Jersey as far as regulations and whatnot. I know I had to go through an FBI check before I was approved to be on an A901 licensure in New Jersey. I know that there are different types of waste. And when you talk about solid waste as opposed to C&D waste, as opposed to tree stumps, there's all different types of waste. So I think we need to be clear, and from what I've witnessed, and I live on Glasgow and 212, I'm right up the block. So from what I've seen, it looks like dirt, it looks like C&D, concrete, block, stone, those kind of items. I don't think I've ever seen a packer or a garbage truck, so to speak, pull up and dump a load there. And that would be putrescible waste, which is solid waste. And that's like garbage from your household or a restaurant, something to that effect. There's a couple of things as I'm sitting here thinking. Okay, so one way to track these trucks. What about their easy passes? I'm sure many of them carry an easy pass. We can find out where they're coming from. I don't believe everybody's bill of lading, where it came from and what was put in that truck. Don't believe everything you read, because it may not be true. Insurance bonds. I know that I had to carry pollution insurance, and we paid $50,000 just for that annually. So are they carrying pollution insurance? And if so, what company are they carrying it with? Have they had to post any kind of bond? And by that, I mean, all right, so being in New Jersey, we call it brownfields. Go to Newark Airport. Has anybody smelled the neighborhood? Well, those are like industrial waste dump sites. They're now considered like toxic, and they're brownfields. So the mitigation, which you mentioned, the cleanup of those, that's a big expense. It's like buku bucks. We're like multi-millions to do that. So is there any bond that could be posted to the town of Saugerties in lieu of testing of these sites should a mitigation need to be necessary? Many of the corporations that were in New Jersey, let's say Leaderly Labs or some of the larger industrial corporations that created that pollution, are still in business today. Inasmuch, the state of New Jersey did seek restitution from those corporations on some of the site mitigations. So those are big Fortune 500 companies. Here we're talking about a family-owned and operated business, the Corollas. I think, my personal opinion is, if this comes to a really bad head for them, they're going to cut bait and run. They're going to file a bankruptcy, and everybody in this town, this community, we're going to get stuck with it, period, at the end of the day. So, aside from that, there's something called a bike-ron, and I don't know if anybody knows what they are. My husband had an experience with one. Okay, so bike-rons are a set of lights that are sensors, and they're required at transfer stations to determine whether or not it's a hot load. And that expression refers to something that's radioactive. So whether it be medical waste that could carry somebody's IV solution that was run through their radio-opaque dyes, or in my husband's case, one of the drivers of another truck went and had a scan done during the day. He couldn't drive his truck through because he was setting off the bike-rons. It was in him, not in the load. So my husband drove the truck through for him. But the point I'm trying to make on this one in particular, New Jersey, Long Island, all of those areas have a high level of radon. Radon is going to set off the bicrons because it's radioactive. So I also know here in the Hudson Valley we have radon, and it's a naturally found substance. So when you talk about fill, quote unquote, is that virgin soil, something from an industrial dump, or is it, well, basically where's it coming from? But there again, I'll allude back to my previous statement. I don't believe everything I read, especially if you're dealing with people that are not straightforward and being forthcoming with you in the first place. What else did I write down? Okay, so I realize whatever legal team is involved here, this is a very big issue. Well, I had the opportunity to deal with the largest law firm in the state of New Jersey on environmental. They also are licensed in New York and internationally. Their name is Reichert, Danzig, Highland, and Peretti. And who knows, they may have added a few more partners since then. But they're in Morristown, New Jersey. And I think it would behoove this community to give them a call, because I think that they have the ability to really, how do I say it? Well, expedite it, and maybe put a little fear in the Corollas as to what they're doing. Because I know when I brought a load in of dirt, I had to go through the Bergen County Utilities Authority, and I had to show that I had that chemically tested. And here's the results from the lab of what was in that dirt. And that was the bottom line. Otherwise, I could not dump that load. So whatever contractor wanted me to do a load of dirt, it was up to him to provide me with the funds to test the load before I even put it in my container. Once that load goes in my container, I own it. So before it even hits my box, I got to make sure it's clean dirt. I'm just saying there's a lot to this. So anyway, sorry, I didn't mean to take up your time, but I was trying to educate. You know, there's a lot of thoughts here. You know?
Thank you for your question.
Hi, Krista Behringer. I live on 212, about 10 houses or 10 properties down from the 212 location. And in supporting what we just heard, I think one of the things that's really frustrating me is the lack of compliance with existing law. And I hear when you say we want to encourage the DEC, that just sounds really nice. And I'm really frustrated with a state entity that is allowing a permit and is actually putting on their website. If you go to DEC and you type in C&D facilities, there's only 2 in Ulster County. One of them is not allowed. The other one was grandfathered in prior to the laws. So why we're allowing the DEC to tell us, oh no, they're not allowed, but advertise and market them on their website to do the activity they're not allowed to do. And then, I have a little bit of understanding about government. I understand that some governments have the ability to go to other government entities and say, you're not adhering to your law. You're not doing what you're supposed to do. So when can we as a municipality look at the other government entity and say, you're not doing what you're supposed to do, and it's not okay because it's not protecting our people. So when can we see something happen to the DEC?
That's why we're all here, because everyone here has to say something to the DEC. I'm requesting that you all follow through with the petition, making phone calls, calling your representatives, and ask them to do exactly that.
So to answer Chris's...
I just want to clarify, C&D, construction and demolition, that's what that means. This is not roofing. This is not the siding off a house, a kitchen, a tear down. This is dirt. This is concrete. This is not C&D. So it doesn't fall under that description. So the Corollas are operating outside of the realm of C&D.
And the DEC is allowing and marketing them to do what they are not allowed to do.
Well, either way, whether it's C or D or dump, they don't have to
I'm going to let Fred, go ahead, Fred.
Krista is raising a valid point, and one of the things we are imploring upon them is to please enforce your laws. The town doesn't have the resources to enforce the state law. We just can't. We do believe, and we are enforcing the town laws the best that we possibly can. We believe that the DEC has authority that is underutilized at this point, to say the least, and we think at this point they have come to the realization that they have to do more on our behalf. Emily wrote a wonderful letter pointing out the areas where she thinks they have enforcement authority. I wholeheartedly agree with that and more. Her letter highlighted the areas that are easy picking, so to speak, where they can take what we believe to be a more aggressive enforcement posture. But we agree that by their own standards, this is not allowable. The permit, we think, has been violated, and we think they have grounds to withdraw that privilege. But they need to do that, and we are kind of asking for your help in imploring that upon them. We'll let Emily speak, because she did the letter, and it was on our behalf, and it was excellent, quite frankly. And it makes the very point that Krista was making, that we need, the DEC is there to protect our groundwater, to protect our environment, and they are the big dog in the room. They have given feedback that because of that memorandum, and they're seeking to get privilege to go onto the property through warrants as well, that they haven't received yet, that they are compromising their ability to enforce their own laws. We are enforcing the town laws to the best of our ability with the advice of council. But I'm going to let Emily talk about the letter that she did on our behalf.
Well, I just wanted to follow up and say that it's maybe 6 pages. I think that we have some copies of it. It explains all the legal aspects of it. Just to back up a little, when the town first went to DEC about this and talked to an environmental conservation officer, they essentially said there's nothing we can do. So this has come a long way in a relatively short time, and I understand that it frustrates me. But now that when the town is calling and Mountainkeeper is calling, they know they've got to do something, and so they're stepping it up slowly, and that's why we want to keep putting that pressure on. I just wanted to mention that, as far as levels of government, your state representatives from your state senator and state assembly member's office, are there representatives here from those offices? You want to
Will you please stand?
raise your hands? Yeah.
Amador's office and
Ed Take's office?
So we'll be updating them. I'm Nejla. But we've been in contact. They couldn't send someone this evening, but we're also speaking with them, and they want to have a follow-up conversation. But we should be calling their offices as well, or speaking tonight.
Were they invited and they
Yes.
They refused to show? Is that what happened? No, refused. It was they didn't. Mike, use the mic. Use the mic. I can't hear you.
Scheduling didn't align for Take's office, but Amador's office sent a representative, and we have,
So those are your elected representatives at the state level, and they should, they're your conduit to your state agencies. So they're a good contact for you as well.
Hi, my name is Barbara O'Hare. I just had one thought. Is there any potential that the dumping and that the water off of John Jai Road might go into the waterways that ultimately service the reservoir for the city of Kingston? And if so...
I don't believe geologically that's a possibility, but I'm certainly not an expert. The groundwater flow from the Felquist site travels in the southeasterly direction, which would lead it away from Cooper Lake and the area that serves the city of Kingston.
Yeah,
geographically, we're much lower.
The Xena Reservoir is the one that I was speaking of. I was trying to visualize in my head the map and the waterway.
I don't have the expertise to say absolutely not. I suspect it's unlikely, but that's a fair question. And if there needs to be mitigation, we need to address that before.
Well, I think we'll have a lot more fighting power if that were to be determined.
Just for the fact that we can't rule that out, just that in itself
I don't know
points
who,
to the urgency of this situation,
who
and
should
why
be
we want this to get
assigned
under control.
to research that, to take a look at that.
DEC is really the one with those resources to do that.
Well, but maybe there's somebody that one of us knows that could at least initiate the research. I do have one other thing to say. Of course, back in 1987, there was a construction and debris, etc., dumping on Woodland Road in Marbletown.
Okay.
And actually, NBC News had covered it. It was just when I was moving into the area and buying my first house. I remember getting involved with the town and alerting a number of people about being proactive with it. I don't recall the outcome, but it probably the way they dealt with it is probably online, and it was quite a big deal at the time.
We welcome any attention. Saugerties Times is here. They've been terrific. They've done an extensive amount of reporting, and the Freeman has done a pretty fair amount of reporting. The Record has picked up on it a little bit. We believe we're right, and we believe that this issue deserves all the attention.
Well, I'm just thinking that perhaps some of the methodology that was used in fighting that instance might be useful.
Part of why we're here is to bring attention.
Hi, my name is Eldad Ben-Ari. I'm a resident of Saugerties. Just to fill in a little bit to what the lady spoke of, I think maybe it's time to have a joint meeting with the Kingston Town Board or City Board, whatever they're called, and point out to them that the possibility exists that their own water will be polluted, and let them join in the fight, financially and otherwise. Thank you.
My name is Lily Roth, and I live across the street from the mess and Goat Hill Road. I would recommend that the letter from Emily and the response that she got from the DEC be sent directly to the judge or the courts in Kingston so he can see what we are complaining about directly, and not necessarily going through our town attorneys, but directly from the group here.
Yeah, the court will really only hear from parties in the case, so I think that the right route for that would be through the town, which is the party in the case, but absolutely, it should go to the judge.
Has there been any effort to get bigger media involved? If there is any chance that New York City water can be affected, has anybody contacted the New York Times, the New York City media? I mean, really, get this out to as much media as possible?
I can answer that. I sent an email last week requesting some attention to this matter to a reporter at the New York Times, and we're playing phone tag. Sure. Yes, we have been focusing mostly on local media, but New York Times came up a couple of times in the different public forums.
I don't know if you have a publicist or somebody who's media savvy, who's, on the team. Potentially, yeah.
I'll take your card. The state.
Across the state, and to sort of start to shine light on it could be really powerful. Yeah. Yeah.
My name is Mike Avino. I'm a resident of Saugerties. Newsday, a newspaper article company in Long Island, recently published an article about the Operation Pay Dirt. and it involved the Roberto Clemente Park that's dealing with the same situation we are. In that article, they cite multiple companies as well as trucking outfits that are here in Saugerties that came from New York City up to Saugerties. One of my questions is has anybody reached out to the officials that are working on that case as of right now? There's a quote in there which I think relates directly to us that came from Stephen Solo, a former Department of Justice Environmental Crimes Chief, and his quote is, "A deal that is too good to be true can be circumstantial evidence." I think it's pretty evident here that this is a major pay-to-play deal. Somebody is funding these people to keep it happening. And my question is have we investigated, have we reached out to whoever is involved with what's going on down there in Roberto Clemente Park?
Our exposure to those situations has come with some cooperation from the district attorney's office. Our local district attorney has participated in parts of those cases and other cases that involve outfits that have participated in this activity all across New York State. And we have some suspicion that our operation is similarly linked to many of those companies. The district attorney's office is trying to help us make that and articulate that argument, and if they're successful, we're going to pursue that avenue as well.
Thank you. Any other questions?
And we have reached out to the state attorney general's office too. I mean, we're unfortunately we're still at the beginning of this fight, and we're ramping up. We're getting a lot more organization and putting resources together, and all these are great ideas, and we're going to follow up on as many as we can.
Oh, yes. Ruth Hirsch, Hudson Valley since 1966 and Saugerties since 1996. I'd like to amplify the suggestion of getting this into the national papers, and if even a handful of us who are here wrote to the New York Times letters to the editors, and a few of them got into the paper, that makes lots of sense. The Nationals are covering the difficulties with the Woodstock Music Festival, and so they might have a little room for water pollution, drinking water issues also. Thank you.
Other questions? Yes.
So my question is there a difference between, sorry, my name's Brad Lale. I'm a pretty new resident of the area. I live just across the street from the John Joy Road, Velqui Road dump situation. So I guess my question is, so there is the DEC and there is the NYC DEP, which I think are two different things. I'm not completely sure, but basically, it does seem that there would be the possibility of there being groundwater pollution in 5 to 10 years when it gets to the water table and affecting New York City's drinking water, which we all know would be a huge disaster. And I just feel like if someone could reach out to not just the DEC, but the New York City Department of Environmental Protection, that seems like that would be a very good idea.
One of the challenges we face in trying to bring the weight of the DEP to this situation is that the areas that are being impacted by this activity are outside of the New York City watershed. So based off of that, geographically, that implies that these activities could or should not have an impact on the groundwater. The DEP's focus in the lower Esopus, the Sawkill, and the Platte Cove streams is to kind of demonstrate that their activities are not having a negative impact and help us with restoration of the water quality in the Esopus Creek and the Sawkill in those areas. The water that is shipped to New York City through the aqueduct generally is below the water that they use. The Shokan, the Gilboa, and those watersheds are the ones where the water is collected and distributed into the New York City watershed. We are below that. It doesn't mean that they don't care, but it's certainly not going to be their priority on our behalf. But we've engaged them. We feel that the arguments here are quite obvious, frankly, and that anyone who has a concern for quality groundwater in our future should be concerned about this activity. And we want to, that's why these entities came to be, and to protect that, to protect quality of life, to ensure that our children have the same opportunity to enjoy outdoor recreation, clean drinking water that we have. And this violates all of those. And we want to do everything we can within our power to stop this activity and seek a quick resolution.
Are there any other questions?
I just wanted to ask, the woman up here who said she was given drinking water,
Yep.
how did that come to be? How did they know that how did that happen? And
I live on Sowood Lane, which is down from the old Saugerties landfill. And ever since I lived in my house, the town has been monitoring my water. They've tested my well first every 10 years and then annually. And last year, the last time they tested my well was March 2018. And I received a letter in August of 2018 that said, your water's fine, everything's great, no problem. No further testing is needed. And then in, April, last month, the Department of Health sent me a letter and notified me that they would be distributing bottled water and, with very little explanation as to why the change of heart. Well, we are.
Yeah.
But I mean, there must be neighbors.
I'm a quarter mile away from Felquay.
Yeah.
I'm downhill from the dump.
So that is for now, the Department of Health and the DEC are looking that as potentially a separate issue. We have a suspicion that it may or may not be. And I've talked to a number of residents. So the DEC and the Department of Health have, in response to water quality issues that happened in Newburgh, that happened in Michigan, we all know what happened in Flint, that was the subject of a lot of media attention. New York State decided, let's look at these emergent toxins, and a place to study them are closed landfills, which Saugerties has, and let's see if we test the groundwater around them, what if these toxins exist. They are 1,4-dioxane and PFAs of 2 different categories. So they did sampling in and near Sawwood and Felquay, and that sampling raised concern. These emerging toxins are so new, a state standard of a tolerable level has not been adopted yet. So what they're applying to suggest that we should offer bottled water is they're saying we believe that the state standard is going to be this many parts per trillion will be considered unhealthy, and the testing came in above that standard. We have a deep concern. I know I've spoken to a couple of homeowners who have had tests for those particular toxins in the past. They've indicated to us that they did not test within measurable levels, or certainly levels that the state standard are going to describe, and we need further testing. This is a question that needs answering. But in the meantime, once again, I'm going to say, if the Department of Health reached out to you and suggested bottled water, please use it in the interest of your family's safety. We understand it's inconvenient and there are serious implications for that, but until we have a better understanding of why those toxins are now showing up, it's important that those residents do everything they can to protect themselves from exposure.
Right. But
We feel, this is another area where we've asked for that data, and we want to look at it. We have some pretty capable town engineers who are willing to look at that data and draw conclusions and lead us to do further testing. And we want to do that as well. I think part of that is going to have to be to test the soil that has been deposited near the landfill and it's influencing these neighborhoods, and say is, if that soil has these types of industrial pollutants in it, then the point you're alluding to is valid. And if that tests clean, then it's obvious that it may be the landfill, and then the town government's going to have a responsibility to do whatever we can to mitigate that situation. But we can't even have that conversation. We don't have the data yet, and once again, this points to the seriousness of the situation and the importance of this being done in a timely way. And the testing is allowed not only on town-owned lands or lands where the residents are willing to cooperate, but the lands that have been used as a dump site. And there has been no testing, to our knowledge, of the Goat Hill Road or the 212 site.
Wait. So let me just say this. My name is Susan Greenstein. I live on John Joy Road, just a couple of driveways down from the Felke site. In March, I think, I, along with other people, selected other people on John Joy and maybe on Saugerties, received a letter. It was a joint letter from the DEC and the New York State Department of Health. And it said, this business about the old closed landfill, and so we're testing your well water at no charge to you if you're willing to have it tested. And so we're like, oh my God, right. Which is actually when we first got into all of this. And fortunately, knock wood, our well water was okay. We're north of the Felke driveway. So we're north of it, and the water apparently, hydrologically, is flowing southeast. But our neighbors, Lorraine and Ed, who are sitting right next to me, who are like on top or on the bottom, or I'm not quite sure geographically where, of the dump site, their water was tested and the 1,4-dioxane was found. And so they were given water now, bottled water by the DEC. They have a nice 5-gallon tank that they get to lug around with them. And it's a horrible, horrible situation. The same is true for Claudine. And I don't know, is anyone else here? So there are other people here. Look, people are raising their hands whose water tested badly as well.
Not been tested, but I'm 80 Goat Hill Road.
Okay, but you haven't been tested yet. But how many people received that letter that we received from the DEC and got the free testing? Right, so there were some, and it doesn't make any sense why some was chosen and others weren't. So that also is a little bit of a mystery. The whole DEC part remains something of a mystery. Oh, and there's Ann who has something to say.
Hi, can you hear me? We were never approached to have our water tested. We are going to. Where do you live? We're at 437 John Joy. So we're a quarter mile on the other side. Saw is that side, and we're on the other side. But so how did the DEC or the Board of the Department of Health decide who they were testing?
It depended on the old dump site, the old Saugerties landfill. It depended on your relationship to the old Saugerties landfill. Not had anything to do with Felke. They were continuing their testing based on the old Saugerties landfill. I'm pretty close to that, I think.
So we could probably have a request to have your well tested if you would like that, and they seem to be pretty open to doing that. So if you have any concern, we'll ask on your behalf. Whether they test or not, they'll have to explain to whether they think it's relevant to test or not. And what he said is true. They did that based off of the identified flow of the geological water that happens from the old landfill site and who is in the path of that water as it would potentially leave the landfill site. So these folks are right in the kind of the red zone. Their home is right below a test well, and they were obviously in the heart of that. The unfortunate part is one of the dump sites is continuous to the landfill site, and the water, when it's in the ground, doesn't know how to make the difference of where it came from. So we need that data. We need to understand where this pollutant is coming from. If it is coming from the dumping site, then that needs to be addressed, obviously, and then there's going to be concern about the Goat Hill site as well, and the 212 site for that matter. If we can determine that it is, in fact, the old landfill, then the town will have the responsibility to mitigate that situation, and we will do that.
Fred, who did you request
we were offered a portion of the data that was shared with the homeowners whose wells were tested from the joint Department of Health and DEC conversation. That data was supplied to us from them. We gave that data to Chazen, who's the town engineer who has done the testing in that area for many years, and Joe Mim, who works for Bernier and Larios, who is also one of the town engineers. Joe has a pretty good background in environmental things. Early in his career, he closed and did a number of cleanups on old industrial sites, so he's pretty well versed and a good understanding of the challenges that we're facing with the dumping, and now with this new challenge of trying to identify where the 1,4-dioxins and the PFAs that have been identified in drinking water are coming from. And that data was very preliminary. Basically, all that data did is help us identify homeowners who could be at risk from exposure to the toxins. At this point, the best advice is if you have a concern, we will reach out to the Department of Health on your behalf to get a test done. They have not been responsive to testing on the Goat Hill site. They've only been responsive to testing around the old landfill site. And but we will reach out on your behalf, put you in contact with the people who can do that. And if you have been approached by the Department of Health and asked to take bottled water, we encourage you to do that until we understand this better.
I just have a quick question. Did you say earlier that those two chemicals that were identified were new? Did you say earlier that those two chemicals that were identified that were toxins were new chemicals?
They have been, yes, we did say that. And
because if they were new, would it be correct to say they are probably not coming from the dump, they're coming from a new situation?
It's too early to make that conclusion. The word was actually emergent toxins. So they, partly as a result of what happened in Flint and other areas in our country that have experienced water issues, these toxins have been identified as pollutants and carcinogens and hazards to our health. It takes a very small amount of these. They're measured in parts per trillion, which is parts per billion, which is a big number. And so very small amounts of this will reach a threshold. They have not even been defined by the DEC that this is an unhealthy threshold for exposure. This is a brand new kind of area of identifying safety in drinking water.
Can I just follow up though? When we say they're new, they're not new like they were just newly invented or newly started being deposited in the environment. What's new about them is the discovery that they're hazardous and that they need to be tested for. And this is the PFOS, are the things that in Newburgh and in Hoosick Falls that were discovered in the drinking water. When you test drinking water, you only test for certain things. You don't test for anything that might be in there. It's only what the actual things you're testing for. And so as these chemicals have become understood as being present in the environment and being a health risk, they're starting to test for them, which wasn't happening before.
Okay, any further questions? Right. Okay, well, I want to thank you all so much for coming out. And this is what civil action is all about, right? Getting together and doing something together. So if you can please call your representatives and ask them to do whatever they can to stop this. There's the phone numbers and emails that I put together out front. Speak with Randy. She's here on behalf of Senator George Amador. You can talk to her briefly. Make it quick, because we all want to go home, I'm sure. And also the petition. Please sign the petition. I wanted you to know about the email addresses there. We have formed a Dump Here Never group, all of us together. And if you are not on that list, I'm going to send out an invitation to the people that are not in the group. You don't have to accept it, but if you want, you can accept it and then be part of this ongoing community discussion around this. So thank you all so much for coming, and thank you, Emily and Mike and Fred.